Mark's hands trembled as he stared at Sarah across the table, the revelation hitting him like a thunderbolt. "You're my blind date?" The restaurant around them seemed to fade away as 18 months of professional courtesy crumbled into something far more complicated. If you're enjoying this journey already, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that will tug at your heartstrings and remind you that sometimes life's greatest surprises come when we least expect them. It had been 3 years since Lisa's death, 3 years of Mark raising their daughter Emma alone. 3 years of microwave dinners, bedtime stories delivered in a voice hoarse from holding back tears, and an empty spot in their queen-sized bed that seemed to grow larger every night. Mark had built walls around his heart so high that even his well-meaning sister Jen had given up trying to set him up, until now. Just one date, Jen had pleaded over the phone last Sunday. "She's perfect, Mark. Smart, kind, works in education like you. You don't have to marry her, just have dinner. For me. For Emma. For yourself." Mark had reluctantly agreed, if only to silence his sister's persistent concern. The accounting department at Westridge High School wasn't exactly the social hub of the institution, but it was where Mark had found refuge after Lisa's passing. Numbers were reliable. Predictable. They didn't leave you suddenly on rain-slicked roads. His coworker Sarah Chen had started 6 months ago, bringing vibrant energy to their otherwise mundane office. They shared a wall between their cubicles, and Mark had grown accustomed to her humming while she worked, the smell of her jasmine tea, and the way she always remembered to ask about Emma. "How was career day?" Sarah had asked just yesterday, leaning against his doorframe with that easy smile that somehow never seemed intrusive. Did Emma enjoy having her dad talk about the thrilling world of school budget analysis? Mark had laughed, a real laugh that still sometimes caught him by surprise. "She told her class that her dad makes sure teachers get paid and that makes me a superhero," he'd replied, feeling that small warm glow of pride that parenthood occasionally granted. Their relationship had always been strictly professional, friendly, but with clear boundaries. Mark had made sure of that. Getting involved with someone at work was complicated. Getting involved with anyone was complicated when you had an 8-year-old daughter whose world had already been shattered once. Mark arrived at Castellino's 15 minutes early, a habit Lisa had always teased him about. "The restaurant won't disappear if you arrive at the actual time," she would say, her eyes crinkling at the corners. The memory made his chest tighten as he gave his name to the hostess. "Your reservation for 2 at 7 p.m., Mr. Reynolds. Right this way." He followed her to a corner table, partially hidden by a decorative wall of wine bottles. Perfect for a first date, intimate enough for conversation but public enough to avoid awkwardness. The hostess placed 2 menus on the table and disappeared with a professional smile. Mark checked his watch, 6:47 p.m. Plenty of time to calm his racing heart. At 7:01, he spotted a familiar figure at the entrance. Sarah was scanning the restaurant, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders instead of the practical ponytail she wore at work. She was wearing a simple blue dress that Mark had never seen before, and for a moment, he was struck by how different, how beautiful, she looked outside the fluorescent lighting of their office. A flash of confusion crossed her face as she caught his eye. She hesitated, then approached his table with uncertainty in her steps. "Mark? Are you meeting someone here too?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "Actually, yes," he replied, suddenly feeling awkward. "I'm waiting for a blind date my sister set up. What about you?" Sarah's eyes widened slightly. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I'm supposed to be meeting someone named Mark," she said slowly. "A single dad. Teacher. Set up by his sister Jennifer." The realization crashed over him like a wave. He stared at her, pieces clicking into place. Jen had mentioned her friend from yoga had a coworker who would be perfect for him. He'd never made the connection. "You're my blind date," he said, the words coming out as a statement rather than a question. Sarah nodded, a mixture of emotions playing across her face. And you're mine, she responded, a small, nervous laugh escaping her lips. Well, this is unexpected, Mark finished for her, his mind racing. Sarah, whom he saw every day. Sarah, who knew about his budget spreadsheet obsession and his collection of terrible dad jokes. Sarah, who had seen him at his most mundane. I can leave if this is too awkward, she offered, still standing beside the table, her purse clutched tightly in her hands. We can pretend this never happened on Monday. Mark looked up at her, really looked at her perhaps for the first time. The woman who had brought cookies when Emma was sick and he'd had to take a day off. The woman who stayed late helping him reconcile accounts when the district audit was due. The woman whose laugh sometimes made him forget, just for a moment, that he was supposed to be grieving forever. Please stay, he said, surprised by the certainty in his voice. Unless you'd rather not. I'd like to stay, Sarah replied, sliding into the seat across from him. Though I have to admit, this isn't how I pictured our first date. You've pictured us dating? Mark asked, surprised. A blush crept across Sarah's cheeks. Maybe once or twice, she admitted. But I would never have asked. I know how complicated things are for you, with Emma and everything else. The waiter appeared with water and a basket of bread, momentarily saving Mark from having to respond. After they ordered drinks, a glass of Cabernet for Sarah, a bourbon on the rocks for Mark, an awkward silence settled between them. So, Mark finally said, how much did Jen's friend tell you about me? That you're a dedicated father, that you work at a high school, and that you haven't dated since your wife passed away, Sarah replied honestly. She didn't mention your name or where you worked. I guess she thought it would be better as a surprise. Mark nodded, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. And knowing all that now, plus the fact that we work together, are you disappointed? Sarah's expression softened. Why would I be disappointed? Because I'm complicated. I come with baggage. And now you know I'm the same boring guy you see shuffling papers every day. Sarah reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of touching his. Mark, I agreed to this date because everything I heard about you sounded like someone I'd want to know better. Finding out it's you just means I already know some of the good parts. She smiled. Like how you bring your daughter's artwork to the office and think no one notices you hanging it up. Or how you always make fresh coffee when you finish the pot, even though I know you drink tea. Mark felt something shift inside him, a door opening that had been locked for a very long time. He took a sip of his water, trying to steady his voice before speaking. Emma asked me this morning if I was going on a play date, he said with a small laugh. I told her it was a grown-up dinner with a friend. She said I should wear my dinosaur tie because friends like dinosaurs. I almost did. I would have loved the dinosaur tie, Sarah replied, her eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. Next time, Mark said, the words slipping out before he could analyze them. I mean, if there is a next time. Sarah's smile widened. I'd like that. The waiter returned with their drinks, and as they ordered food, Mark felt the knot in his chest begin to loosen. This was Sarah, who had seen him spill coffee down his shirt on a Monday morning, who knew which budget lines he was likely to miscalculate when he was tired, who had once helped him wrap a last-minute birthday present for Emma when he'd forgotten it in his car. As their appetizers arrived, Mark found himself sharing stories about Emma he'd never told at work, her determination to learn to ride a bike without training wheels, her newfound love of astronomy, her questions about her mother that sometimes left him breathless with grief. How do you do it? Sarah asked softly. How do you keep going when it hurts so much? Mark looked down at his glass, turning it slowly between his fingers. One day at a time, he answered honestly. Some days are harder than others. But Emma needs me to be okay, so I try to be. She's lucky to have you, Sarah said. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing an amazing job. Their conversation flowed more easily after that, moving from personal histories to favorite books, from workplace gossip to childhood memories. Mark learned that Sarah had moved to their city after ending a long-term relationship with a man who hadn't wanted children, something she'd always dreamed of having. "I felt like I was starting over completely," she explained as they shared a tiramisu. "New job, new apartment, new life. It was terrifying. But brave," Mark added. "Starting over takes courage." Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. "So does going on a first date when you weren't planning to date again." Mark couldn't argue with that. The evening had surprised him in more ways than one. He'd expected awkwardness and obligation. Instead, he'd found comfort and connection. With Sarah, he didn't have to pretend that his life was simpler than it was. She already knew some of his complications. As they walked to the parking lot, a light rain began to fall. Mark instinctively reached out, his hand finding the small of Sarah's back as they navigated a puddle. The simple contact sent a jolt through him, the first time he'd touched a woman with any hint of intimacy in 3 years. "I had a really nice time," Sarah said when they reached her car. She turned to face him, raindrops glistening in her hair. "So did I," Mark replied, suddenly feeling as nervous as a teenager. "Would it make Monday morning unbearably awkward if I said I'd like to see you again? Outside of work, I mean." Sarah's smile was answer enough, but she added, "Not awkward at all. In fact, I was hoping you'd say that." There was a moment, brief but electric, when Mark thought about kissing her. Instead, he stepped back, respecting the delicate new thing growing between them. "I should get home to Emma," he said. "My sister's watching her, and she has school tomorrow." Sarah nodded. "Of course. I'll see you Monday." As Mark drove home, his thoughts were a whirlwind. The evening had been nothing like he'd expected. He'd gone from dread to shock to something that felt dangerously like hope in the span of a few hours. But as he pulled into his driveway, doubt began to creep in. What was he doing? Sarah was his coworker. Dating her would complicate his carefully constructed routine. And what about Emma? How would she react to her father spending time with someone who wasn't her mother? Jen was waiting on his couch, a knowing smile on her face as he walked through the door. "How was your date?" she asked innocently. "You knew," Mark accused, hanging up his jacket. "You knew it was Sarah from work." Jen's smile widened. "Guilty. Amy from yoga mentioned setting up her friend Sarah with a single dad, and when she described where Sarah worked, I connected the dots." "Are you mad?" Mark sank into the armchair across from her. "I should be. But no, I'm not mad." "So it went well?" "It was nice," Mark admitted. "Really nice, actually. But it's complicated, Jen. We work together. And there's Emma to consider." "Emma adores Sarah," Jen pointed out. "Remember the Christmas party at your school? Emma talked about Daddy's friend with the pretty laugh 4 days afterward." Mark hadn't made that connection either. Emma had indeed been enchanted by Sarah, who had spent 20 minutes teaching her how to make origami stars. "It's been 3 years, Mark," Jen said gently. "Lisa would want you to be happy." Mark closed his eyes briefly, allowing himself to imagine what Lisa might say. She had been practical, loving, direct. She wouldn't have wanted him to spend years alone. "One step at a time," he said finally. "That's all I can promise." Jen seemed satisfied with that. After she left, Mark checked on Emma, fast asleep with her stuffed penguin clutched against her chest. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his heart full of the fierce, protective love that had sustained him through his darkest days. "What do you think, kiddo?" he whispered. "Should Daddy try being brave?" Monday morning arrived with a flutter of nerves in Mark's stomach. He'd spent Sunday distracted, half listening to Emma's stories about her weekend with her aunt, his mind continuously drifting to Sarah. Would things be awkward between them now? Would their colleagues notice a change? He arrived at work early, as usual, and was surprised to find a cup of tea on his desk. Jasmine, with a sticky note attached, looking forward to our budget meeting. Mark couldn't help but smile. Their weekly budget meeting was usually the most tedious part of Monday mornings. When Sarah appeared in his doorway at 10 a.m., spreadsheets in hand, her professional demeanor was perfectly in place. Only the slight quirk of her lips suggested anything had changed between them. Ready to review the athletics department requests, she asked, her voice betraying nothing. Absolutely, Mark replied, matching her tone. Please, have a seat. They managed to get through the meeting with remarkable composure, though Mark found himself noticing things he'd overlooked before, the way Sarah tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, how her eyes lit up when she found a solution to a problem, the slight raspberry scent of her lip balm when she leaned closer to point out a discrepancy in the numbers. As she gathered her papers to leave, Mark cleared his throat. Sarah, he began, I was wondering if you might like to join Emma and me for pizza and a movie Friday night? Nothing fancy, just at my house. Emma's been asking to see that new animated film about the detective cats. Sarah's professional facade softened. I'd love that, she said. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, Mark replied. Emma's excited to show you her new telescope. I may have mentioned you were coming over. Sarah's smile widened. A telescope? That sounds wonderful. The week passed in a blur of stolen glances and brief, professionally appropriate conversations. By Friday, Mark found himself cleaning his already tidy house with unusual thoroughness while Emma bounced around in excitement. Is Miss Sarah staying for a sleepover? Emma asked as she helped arrange pillows on the couch. Mark nearly dropped the pizza box he was opening. No, sweetheart. Miss Sarah is just coming for dinner and a movie. Emma nodded sagely. Like a play date. Something like that, Mark agreed, wondering how to explain to an 8-year-old that her father was nervously attempting to date for the first time since her mother died. When Sarah arrived, bringing homemade cookies despite Mark's insistence she didn't need to bring anything, Emma immediately took charge of the evening. You can sit next to Daddy, she informed Sarah, patting the middle cushion of the couch. I'll sit on the other side so you don't get scared during the movie. That's very thoughtful, Sarah replied seriously. I sometimes do get startled easily. Mark watched their interaction with a mixture of relief and wonder. He'd worried about how Emma would react to Sarah outside of school functions, but his daughter seemed entirely comfortable with her presence in their home. The evening passed pleasantly, with Emma gradually migrating to lie on the floor with pillows, leaving Mark and Sarah sitting closer than they had planned. By the time the movie ended, Emma was half asleep, and Mark carried her to bed despite her drowsy protests that she wasn't tired. When he returned to the living room, Sarah was washing their dishes, her sleeves rolled up and her hair tied back. You don't have to do that, Mark said, grabbing a dish towel to help dry. I don't mind, Sarah replied. It's been nice, being in a family home again. My apartment is pretty quiet. Too quiet or good quiet? Mark asked. Sometimes one, sometimes the other, Sarah admitted. I like my independence, but there are moments when the silence gets heavy. Mark nodded, understanding completely. That's why I keep the TV on sometimes, even when I'm not watching it. Just to have voices in the house. They finished the dishes in companionable silence, and when Sarah gathered her purse to leave, Mark found himself reluctant to end the evening. Thank you for coming, he said, walking her to the door. Emma had a great time. So did I. I did too, Sarah replied. Very much. This time, the moment between them stretched longer. Mark took a small step forward, his heart pounding as if he were about to jump from a great height. Gently, he leaned in and pressed his lips to Sarah's cheek, a gesture so modest it might have seemed trivial to anyone else. But for Mark, it was momentous, the first intentionally affectionate touch he'd initiated with a woman since Lisa. Sarah's eyes were soft with understanding when he pulled back. "Good night, Mark," she said quietly. "I'll see you Monday." As weeks turned into months, Sarah became a regular presence in Mark and Emma's life. They established a careful routine: Friday movie nights, occasional Saturday outings to museums or parks, and even a few dinner dates when Jen was available to watch Emma. At work, they maintained their professional relationship, though their colleagues had begun to exchange knowing glances when they arrived at staff meetings together. 4 months after their first date, Mark found himself facing the anniversary of Lisa's death. It had become a somber tradition for him and Emma to visit the cemetery together, leaving flowers and sharing stories about the wife and mother they had lost. The night before, Sarah called to check on him. "I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you," she said. "If you need anything tomorrow, or if you'd rather cancel our plans this weekend, I understand completely." Mark was silent for a moment, emotions thick in his throat. "Would you," he began, then paused to steady his voice. "Would you want to come with us? Not to the cemetery, that's just for Emma and me, but after. We usually get ice cream and go to the botanical gardens." Lisa loved flowers. The invitation surprised them both. It was a significant step, including Sarah in what had been a private ritual of remembrance. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked gently. "I don't want to intrude." "I'm sure," Mark said, surprising himself with how true it felt. "But I should ask Emma first." Emma, as it turned out, was enthusiastically supportive of the idea. "Mom would like Sarah," she declared with the certainty only children can muster. "She's nice and she makes you laugh, Daddy." The next day, after their cemetery visit, Mark and Emma met Sarah at the ice cream shop near the botanical gardens. Mark felt emotionally drained but somehow lighter than in previous years. When Sarah greeted them with warm smiles but no intrusive questions, he felt a wave of gratitude for her intuitive understanding of what they needed. As they walked through the gardens, Emma ran ahead to explore a butterfly exhibit, leaving Mark and Sarah walking side by side along a path bordered with summer blooms. "Thank you for today," Mark said quietly. "For understanding." Sarah slipped her hand into his, a gesture that had become familiar over the past months. "Lisa will always be part of your lives," she said. "I would never want to change that." Mark squeezed her hand, words failing him. They walked in silence until they reached a bench overlooking a small pond. Mark sat down, drawing Sarah beside him. "I've been thinking a lot about moving forward," he said after a moment. "About what that means. For years, I thought moving forward meant leaving Lisa behind, and I couldn't do that. But I'm starting to understand that's not what it means at all." Sarah waited, giving him space to find the words he needed. "Moving forward means carrying her with me but not letting grief anchor me in place," Mark continued. "And I think I'm ready to take another step." "What kind of step?" Sarah asked softly. Mark turned to face her, his expression serious but no longer haunted. "I'd like to call you my girlfriend," he said. "If that's something you'd want too." Sarah's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I would like that very much." When Emma returned, bubbling with excitement about the butterflies, she found her father and Sarah sitting closer together, their fingers intertwined. With a child's acceptance of happiness wherever it appears, she simply squeezed herself onto the bench between them, launching into a detailed description of the blue morpho butterfly she'd seen. Mark met Sarah's eyes over Emma's head, a silent understanding passing between them. This new configuration, the three of them together, felt right in a way he hadn't thought possible. That evening, after dropping Sarah at her apartment and putting Emma to bed, Mark found himself standing before the photograph of Lisa on his bedside table. "I think you'd like her," he whispered to the smiling face of his late wife. "She's patient with Emma. She makes terrible puns that would have made you groan. She doesn't try to replace you." He touched the frame gently. "I'll always love you. But I think I might be falling in love with her too, and I needed you to know. The relationship between Mark and Sarah deepened gradually, with careful consideration for Emma's feelings at every step. Sarah began staying for dinner more often. She helped Emma with science projects and cheered at soccer games. She and Mark developed inside jokes and favorite restaurants. They argued occasionally, about politics, about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie, about the proper way to load a dishwasher, and learned to make up with grace and humor. 8 months into their relationship, they faced their first significant challenge when Sarah was offered a promotion that would move her to a different department but require occasional travel. The prospect of Sarah being away, even temporarily, stirred up unexpected anxiety for both Mark and Emma. "I don't want you to go," Emma declared tearfully when Sarah explained about her trips. "What if you don't come back? Mom went away and never came back." The statement hit Mark like a physical blow. He hadn't realized Emma had been harboring this fear, equating any departure with permanent loss. Sarah knelt before Emma, her own eyes glistening. "I will always come back," she promised. "Always. I'm not going far, and not for long." Later, after Emma had been reassured and was in bed, Mark and Sarah sat on the porch swing, a blanket wrapped around their shoulders against the autumn chill. "I didn't know she was worried about that," Mark said, his voice rough with emotion. "I should have realized." "We couldn't have known," Sarah replied gently. "But now we do, and we can help her through it." Mark nodded, noticing Sarah's use of "we" with a warmth that spread through his chest. "The promotion is a big opportunity for you," he said. "I'm proud of you, and I want you to take it. We'll figure out the rest." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. "I was thinking," she said hesitantly, "and please tell me if this is too soon, but what if I moved closer? Not in with you," she added quickly, "but nearby. So the travel wouldn't mean being so far from you both." Mark considered the suggestion. It was a significant commitment, Sarah rearranging her life to be closer to them. But the thought of her living nearby, of more impromptu dinners and lazy Sunday mornings, of Emma being able to walk to Sarah's apartment when she was older, it felt right. "I'd like that," he said simply. "Very much." Sarah's new apartment was a 15-minute walk from Mark's house, a cozy one-bedroom with large windows and a small balcony. Emma helped decorate, adding her own touches, a hand-painted flower pot, a framed drawing of the three of them, a collection of seashells from their first beach trip together. As Sarah settled into her new role at work and her new home closer to them, Mark found himself thinking more seriously about their future. The walls he had built around his heart had not merely been breached, they had been methodically, lovingly dismantled, brick by brick, by a woman who understood that healing wasn't a destination but a journey. On their 1-year anniversary, exactly 12 months after that fateful blind date, Mark took Sarah back to Castellino's. They sat at the same corner table, now laden with memories both awkward and sweet. "Did you ever imagine, that first night, that we'd end up here?" Mark asked, raising his glass in a toast. Sarah's eyes sparkled in the candlelight. "Honestly? I hoped, but I didn't dare expect it. You were so guarded then." "With good reason," Mark replied. "I was terrified." "And now?" Mark reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Now I'm still scared sometimes, but not of loving you. More of, how much I love you. How important you've become to Emma and me." Sarah's expression softened. "You're important to me too. Both of you. More than I can say." After dinner, they walked along the riverfront, the city lights reflecting on the water. Mark had planned this moment carefully, consulting with Emma, who had given her enthusiastic approval. "Sarah," he said, stopping at a scenic overlook. "This past year has been transformative. You've shown me that it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future. You've loved Emma with such generosity. You've been patient with my hesitations and celebrated my small steps forward." Sarah watched him, her eyes widening as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I'm not asking you to replace anyone," Mark continued, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "I'm asking you to help us build something new. Something that includes memories of what came before but isn't limited by them." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "Will you marry me?" Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling onto her cheeks. For a moment, she seemed unable to speak, and Mark felt a flash of uncertainty. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Mark. I would be honored to marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Mark felt a profound sense of peace. This wasn't a betrayal of his past, it was an affirmation of his capacity to grow beyond his grief without forgetting it. "Emma helped me pick out the ring," he admitted as Sarah admired it in the moonlight. "She said blue was better than a diamond because it matches your eyes and because it's different. She's very wise for 9 years old." Sarah laughed through her tears. "She is indeed. I can't wait to tell her." "Actually," Mark said with a smile, "she's waiting up for us. Jen's with her, and they're probably surrounded by celebration supplies by now." When they arrived at Mark's house, soon to be their house, they found Emma and Jen had indeed prepared a small engagement party, complete with a homemade banner reading, "Congratulations Mark and Sarah," and cupcakes with blue frosting. Emma launched herself at Sarah, wrapping her arms around her future stepmother's waist. "Did you say yes? Please say you said yes." "I absolutely said yes," Sarah confirmed, kneeling to Emma's level to show her the ring. "It's perfect," Emma declared, her face solemn with the importance of the moment. "Now you'll be my mom too." "Not instead of my first mom," she added quickly, looking up at Mark. "But as well as. Daddy said I could have 2 moms, one in heaven and one here." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again as she pulled Emma into a tight hug. "I would be so proud to be your second mom," she whispered. "So very proud." As Mark watched the 2 most important people in his world embrace, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him. Their path forward wouldn't always be smooth, blending families never was, even when one family member lived only in memory and photographs, but they would navigate it together, with love and patience and understanding. Later that night, after Emma had finally gone to bed and Jen had left with tearful congratulations, Mark and Sarah stood in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side as they had so many times before. "Are you happy?" Sarah asked quietly, passing him a plate to dry. Mark considered the question, not with the hesitation of doubt but with the thoroughness of someone who had learned to recognize true happiness after its absence. "I am," he said finally. "Deeply happy. Not because everything is perfect or because I've forgotten what came before, but because I've found a way to hold both joy and grief in the same heart. Because of you." Sarah set down the dishcloth and turned to face him fully. "I love you, Mark Reynolds. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love your terrible jokes and your spreadsheet obsession. I love watching you braid Emma's hair and cheer at her soccer games. I love who I am when I'm with you both." Mark pulled her close, still amazed at how perfectly she fit against him. "I love you too. Thank you for sitting at my table that night, even when you thought I was just your awkward coworker." "Best wrong table I ever took," Sarah murmured against his chest. Their wedding, 6 months later, was small and intimate, a gathering of close friends and family in the botanical gardens where they had cemented their bond on that difficult anniversary. Emma served as both flower girl and ring bearer, taking her dual roles with characteristic seriousness. During the ceremony, they included a moment of remembrance for Lisa, lighting a candle in her honor. "Love is not diminished when shared," the officiant said. "It is multiplied." As Mark recited his vows, looking into Sarah's eyes with their future stretching before them, he felt a lightness he had thought lost forever. Not because he had forgotten his past, but because he had found the courage to carry it forward into a new beginning. The path from grief to joy is rarely straight, and never easy. It winds through valleys of sorrow and climbs steep inclines of doubt. But sometimes, if we're brave enough to keep walking, it leads us to unexpected destinations, to wrong tables that turn out to be exactly right, to coworkers who become companions, to second chances at love that honor first loves rather than replace them. As Mark and Sarah shared their first dance as husband and wife, with Emma twirling happily around them, he realized that life's most beautiful moments often come disguised as mistakes or coincidences or blind dates arranged by well-meaning sisters. All we have to do is be brave enough to recognize them when they arrive. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Remember that love has infinite capacity. It can embrace what was, what is, and what might be, all at once. Sometimes the most unexpected meetings can lead to the most beautiful journeys, and sometimes the wrong table turns out to be exactly where you were meant to be all along.